Shalom and welcome to Insights, Israel and the Middle East. We're here to connect the dots between the land, the Bible, and current events.
Energy is not a luxury, it's a necessity, especially in a country like Israel where our ethos is built around a startup nation. If you want algorithms to run, if you want computers to run,
you need power.
You need power.
So Iran, we're at the heart of the beast, and this is what sets this station apart from other stations.
Yes.
You hit the jackpot, and it's transformed the region. My children, your children's children will reap the benefit of this.
Absolutely.
So this is ground zero, huh? Good to see you.
We won't live by our sword, but we will live with our sword. We'll be on the guard all the time. You'll see the flags when you come in, the Israel flag, the Texas flag, and of course the US of A.
You know, people always think about natural gas, coal, but this here is the future. Everything that you're describing is to bring God glory. It's not for money, it's not for power, it's not for personal gain. It's to show the world that God is faithful to his word. And I'm looking at that, I'm saying that is a hugely powerful testament.
It said the land would not lack anything. Oil isn't anything, so it wouldn't lack it.
When we think about the miracle of the return of the Jewish people to the land, if there's one thing that we all understand is that the people of Israel arrived to a place where there was nothing. It was a desolate country. And today, 70 years later, we see a country that leads in many technologies, but especially in energy. The Bible tells us to be a light to the nation by presenting the Messiah of Israel to the nation, but also to be a light in technology. And today, Israel is a source of energy to Egypt, to Jordan, to the country around us. So let us watch together the miracle of energy in the land of Israel.
Pretty much everything we do in everyday life depends on one thing: available energy. And for us in Israel, the concept or the idea of being dependent on our neighbors for our available energy is something quite unsettling. We have to be able to stand alone on our own resources in this country.
As a Christian Zionist and a New Covenant believer, Isaiah 65:1, the calling to render assistance to the Jewish people in the nation of Israel and to help the people of Israel maintain their political and economic independence.
Coal, fuel oil, all came over to Israel via containers. None of its neighbors would supply energy. It's expensive, it's highly polluting.
Israel truly needs, any industrial nation needs, to not be dependent on other countries. That's why we're here.
Geologists at the time said that it's conceivable that there is gas down there.
God called me and sent me there. I didn't know how or why. I just knew that I'm supposed to help them find the oil.
Until you drill, you don't really know it.
All I know is I'm just going to do what he says to do. He tells me to do something, I'm doing it.
You know, when you think about it, you really can't run a modern-day economy without available fuel and gas. I mean, for this car specifically, but also for Israel at large. Because we're an island economy, we have a large defense force, we need to have ongoing and available fuel and gas in this country. During the Arab Spring in 2011, the natural gas pipeline from Egypt to Israel was blown up not one, not two, but 4 separate times, leaving Israel desperate for a reliable source of energy. In the 1970s, regional instability caused the cost of oil to spike more dramatically than ever before in history. This impacted the global economy and especially the United States. Energy independence is hugely important for any country, but in Israel, it's a necessity. We're here because Delek and other companies have discovered a huge amount of gas, of natural gas, just out that way. If it's been there for so long and no one knew it was there, there's clearly some kind of like magic or genius that went into the process.
I don't know if genius, but like a mix of science and guts and some belief. In the turn of the century, Noble made two modest-sized discoveries. The first discovery, it was about 1 billion cubic meters, enough to supply about a year or so of gas demand here in Israel. Shortly after, the Mary B field was discovered, and that's a much more significant field. That basically started natural gas here in Israel. But in 2009, we made a much more significant discovery, which was Tamar, and that's close to 13 TCF.
Okay.
So that for decades to come.
So a lot of gas.
A lot of gas. And then a year after, we discovered Leviathan, and that's twice as large. So 6, 7 decades in current consumption rates. This was a $3 billion project.
But when they talk about future projections of what it's going to do to our economy, it's enormous.
Even 5 years ago, no one in their right mind would have thought that Israel is going to export petroleum to neighbors. We're now actively exporting to Egypt and to Jordan from Leviathans. That's really significant, not only from an energy perspective, but like geopolitical perspective. That's huge.
The discovery of natural gas turned the tides for Israel, making us not only energy independent, but a global powerhouse in the energy sector. Still, natural gas alone is not enough. The world today very much depends on oil, which has yet to be discovered in Israel. But with a little faith, all things are possible. We're on our way to meet Jeffrey, who's the Israeli CEO for Zion Oil and Gas. This is an American-based company, and we're going to meet him in the Bet Shean Valley. This is sort of through the Jordan Valley in the northern part of Israel. This is a very promising site for finding or oil or gas right inside of Israel.
Hey!
So this is it, huh?
Mati,
Good
how you
to see
doing,
you.
man?
Good, good. Woo, this is the place, huh?
This is it. This is it. Here we are. This is our drilling pad.
This is where it all happened.
Where it happened and it will happen.
We're standing here inside the Jordan Valley, or right next to the Jordan Valley. We're standing on a dirt pad. It seems like there's been a lot of work done here.
This is a drilling pad. For any drilling operations, you have to have a pad, as you see right here. Okay? A few years ago, there wasn't a centimeter here pretty well that wasn't covered with equipment. We took upon ourselves to conduct a 3D survey, 72 kilometers, first time.
And what does that show?
First time in Israel. What does it show? What's 6 kilometers under where you're standing right now, right? And that's why we're here right now, because we are on the verge of drilling our new well, right here. Our founder, John Brown, right? None of us would be here right now if it wasn't for him, okay, had the vision, and we've been drilling actively since 2005. That's 15 years.
John, thank you again for taking the time. Maybe as a first question, you can start with just sharing the backstory of why you founded Zion Oil and Gas.
Well, see, years ago, God told me to write the vision. It's in Habakkuk 2, 2, and 3. It's clear. It said, write the vision. It will come to pass. So you have to be persistent. And I didn't know at that point it was a 39-year journey. I thought it was a 6-month deal. We're going to go over there and get the oil. And I didn't know there was a journey, a faith journey that I was going to have to face. What that was, I was a new believer, and I thought I was so enthusiastic because, I mean, I had God talk to me, man, you know, and that changed my whole life. So, you know, I left my job down there, you know, and took off to Israel. And it's when I went there is when God gave me that vision at the hotel in Tel Aviv. It's all there. His blessing of Jacob, all you got to do is read it. It's the blessings on the head of Joseph. We're on the head of Joseph of Manasseh. Exactly where he told us the oil was is there.
Jeffrey, do you believe we're going to find oil here? I mean, I'm looking around. There's the borders on our east, on our north, our enemies.
We just saw what happened in Beirut. We know what's going further north with ISIS and what happened in Syria. These are our neighbors. You don't choose your neighbors. We are a country that have to have our own resources. The world is going on to renewable and everything such. That's not going to happen tomorrow. Israel truly needs, any industrial nation needs, to have and not be dependent on other countries. We did have a huge find in the Mediterranean offshore, right? But there are security problems with that. If and when we have a discovery here, this will be onshore, right? And it'll be much better protected. So that's why we're here.
So this would be a tool in that direction?
Absolutely.
We've been blessed with an enormous supply of natural gas, and the discovery of oil looks like it could be just around the corner. As we look to the future, we are turning to another, nearly unlimited source of energy that has existed since the creation of the universe.
So, Aran, you get to call this place home every single day, huh?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's our second home. Yeah, this is the place.
So this is it. This is the power plant.
Yeah, this is Shalim, Plot A.
Interesting.
As you can see, this is like a valley of renewable energy in Israel.
Looking into the future, this is one sample of where the country is going.
It's a very huge area. We are able to absorb the sun radiation, free energy radiation.
And this is sort of like the solar valley of Israel. I mean, you have the three main technologies for harvesting energy from the sun. Can you sort of break down how each one works?
We can see we have the PV, we have the trough, and we also have here a storage which contains the heat in the night when the sunlight goes down.
Fascinating.
So, as I mentioned, this is the drive pylon. This is the, let's say, the machine.
This is the engine that moves it.
Yeah. The trough tracks the sun, knows where the sun should be every minute, and it goes from the morning to the sunset.
This is one arm. There's another engine for the other arm.
Exactly.
And we just heard it sort of pivot and rotate. Here, it did it again.
He knows that he needs to rotate because he's doing a correction every few seconds just to see that he's in the middle of the sun.
It's amazing that this is a Jerusalem-based technology here from Israel that's now being used across the world.
Yeah, you're right. So this is called the TESS. TESS is thermal energy storage.
This is what sets this station apart from other stations.
Yes.
You have this like buffer of stored energy that keeps going, even when the sun is down.
Exactly.
So all in all, this part, the traditional part, this is just a regular power plant.
Correct.
This part is where the magic is.
This is the magic.
Because you're just inputting heat into a system.
Correct.
That's the same as any power plant. The difference is, one, you're getting it from the sun. It doesn't cost any money. And two, you have a reserve that's charging when you have a surplus of energy, so you can keep running when that energy source is gone.
Correct.
And all of that without having to input any additional energy. You know, the sun is just endless available energy. And the way you guys have harnessed it and connected it to all the different technologies is truly remarkable, but it also shows how much future there is for this technology.
Israel's founding fathers knew that energy independence is necessary for the continuation and survival of Israel and the Jewish people. Decades later, our efforts continue with no signs of slowing down.
The whole idea was there was no oil in Israel. And the first thing I saw in Deuteronomy was the land would not lack anything. Oil is anything, so it wouldn't lack it.
As believers, we put our hope in God, knowing that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the assurance of things unseen.
We're expecting that we have here a lot of new projects in Israel.
We're energy independent, and second, we're exporting, and that's a big boon for Israel.
When God put me in Zion Oil and Gas and had me created, people would ask me about this oil, and I'd tell them, you know. And it seemed like there was always a blank look on their face. I would have made in 1981, when I got saved, $200,000 a year. You know how I wound up in 12 years? Working in a Baptist church cleaning toilets for $5 an hour. Remember the brook that God sent Elijah to? He sent the ravens to feed them. He said, I'm going to send you to the brook. In other words, you go sit and wait, John. And when it comes time, then you're going to move when it's my time.
This entire place is going to be filled with all the drilling equipment, and then we're going to drill, and we are encouraged that we're going to have a discovery. Obviously, it's going to be a huge impact on Israel. It's a privilege to be living in this country today. And to be able to specifically drill for oil and gas in Israel, lots of words.
Every promise that he made, he's going to keep. Now, because we get tired of waiting, don't mean anything.
With us today, we have somebody very, very special, Dr. Colonel Eran Lerman. He was the Deputy Director of National Security Council for the Prime Minister. Shalom and welcome to our studio.
Shalom, sir. Let me first of all remind
our viewers
that our late Prime Minister, great Golda Meir, used to pull the tale of the great prophet Moses. She used to say, great, great leader, prophet, lousy navigator. 40 years in the desert, we end up in the only part of the region which has no oil. Well, turns out Moses knew more than she did, because we do have quite a lot of energy, but it's offshore. You open the sea, you go down, there's plenty of that. And to really be effective in exporting, we need to team up with Egypt and Cyprus and countries on the other side of the Mediterranean in Europe who would be the gate to the European market. January 2019, there was a meeting in Cairo of the energy ministers of 7 countries that came together, 7 entities: Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, and Jordan, and the Palestinians. In the middle of all the conflicts, and here were 7 countries, and since then we have been joined by France, which is very strongly standing with us. We have a community, not an alliance, but an alignment of countries that want to make good use of these energy resources. And if we build one pipeline, common to Egypt, Cyprus, and Israel, we can take our product to Europe. The problem is we are running into a conflict with Turkey. And Turkey is led by a party which is Islamist in nature. It wants to reverse the secularization of Turkish society. We have to remember, when American pilgrims sailed to Massachusetts, the Ottoman Empire was the most powerful nation on earth. And now Erdogan is trying to build this glory again. He is pushing an Islamist agenda. He hates the government in Egypt because they kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood. He hates Israel because of Jerusalem. He hates the Greeks because of all Turkish grievances. And he's trying to push the borders of Turkey so as to block Israel, Egypt, and Cyprus.
Do you see, because of our finding of gas, we took a different place in the table?
Well, we are certainly by now a country that is no longer dependent on foreign energy. We can become a significant exporter, combined with the transformation of Israel within the last generation from an economic basket case into one of the world-leading centers of innovation, high-tech, AI.
That's fulfillment of prophecy, that God brought the people of Israel and God is blessing the people of Israel, that Israel will be a light to the nation.
When I read this famous line, there will be men, old men and women and children playing in the streets of Jerusalem. Well, it's a city of nearly 1 million people. The prophecy is alive.
The miracle of the return of the Jewish people. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
When we talk about the future of Israel's energy grid, that story cannot be told without speaking with Yosef Abramovich. He's this country's founding father of solar energy.
We had moved from Boston to a small kibbutz in the Arava Desert, the 3rd most extreme desert in the world. When we got out of the van, it was the end of the day, and the van's air conditioned. We opened the doors, and it was like, oh my God, hit. We are just hit. And I say, oh, I'm sure the whole place works on solar. And of course it didn't. And when I understood that nobody was going to do it, I said, this I'm going to do. And I thought it was going to be easy.
Clearly it wasn't.
Yeah. We need to come up with a business model called the Arava Company. But it was the first, and the first is always the hardest in every market. Plus, I was just hit with this crazy vision. Wow, wouldn't it be cool if we got the whole area, the south of the country, from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, to go 100% daytime solar by 2020. Like, I was just like on fire about that. And everyone, again, was just like,
it's not gonna happen.
It's technically not feasible, financially it's not feasible.
So you built this first field, and you're somehow victorious. What was the battle to get this approved? What was the battle to get through the red tape on this project?
So the state would essentially, the first megawatts would have to essentially be subsidized to be able to jumpstart an entire industry. So you can understand some objection. There's no technical expertise in the country. The gas companies, everybody tried and no one could break through. And I think because we were coming from a place of values, because we wanted to do something majestic and good for the environment as well, they reluctantly gave us like a pass. When they opened the doors just a little bit.
Did you see a substantial shift in the way people looked the notion of clean or green energy after this happened or during the process? Was there something click in the heads of people?
We saw really clearly 14 years later. In other words, today. Today, we're celebrating a whole year. This is the first region in the world to be 100% solar powered during the day.
Amazing.
Yosef and his team had to do everything from raising capital to lobbying for changes to Israeli energy laws. In the process, the minds and hearts of Israeli leaders were opened, and they welcomed solar energy to this country. But Yosef didn't stop there.
So there's 600 million people in Africa without access to power. And the population of the continent is going to double in one generation. Wow. The most important value to me is that we're all created in God's image. And that, therefore, we're all endowed with the right to dignity. The dignity of real education, can't have it without power. Dignity of healthcare, the dignity of a job and a growing economy that needs to be able to create these jobs. None of it is possible without electricity. In the Bible, in the Garden of Eden, God creates a beautiful universe and gifts it to humanity to work it and to also guard it. So what's stronger than partnering with an orphan youth village and having that income cover all the healthcare costs plus, for 500 orphans? So it's all connected. This is like, I'm actually, at a loss for words.
Yosef is someone who practices what he preaches. His own nuclear family reflects his desire to impact those in need. Together with his wife Susan, Yosef raised 5 children, 2 of whom were adopted from Ethiopia and given a renewed chance to thrive in the Promised Land. Because when someone's life mission is based on biblical values, their business ventures and their private life are often indistinguishable.
Shalom and welcome to Insights, Israel and the Middle East. We're here to connect the dots between the land, the Bible, and current events.
We're just coming out of the super long drought period.
The serious drought has been 8 years running.
So David, are we going to get to walk through this crazy place?
Yes, definitely. We are here to make sure that we'll have water for another 100 years.
Millions of people are relying on this and other pumping stations.
Huge infrastructure, unprecedented infrastructure are being built now.
If you said to anyone 20 years ago, this is what's going to happen with Israel, they'd be like, no way. It's nothing short of a miracle.
I believe that Israel can help a lot to solve the water problem, first in the Palestinian Authority, then in Jordan, all the Middle East.
It's not a resource you can negotiate over. It's not, okay, I guess we'll do without water this month. It's non-negotiable to the point of like going to war.
The word water in Hebrew, mayim, appears in the word heaven, shamayim. You know, it says in Genesis that in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The word heaven is a combination of two words, mayim and sham. There is water. Water is mentioned over 700 times in the Bible. More than hope, more than faith even, more than praise. The Bible tells us that every time that the people of Israel kept the commandments, God blessed them. How did He bless them? He gave them the rain on time. Every time that the people of Israel turned their backs to the God of Israel, God stops the rain on the earth. We see that water and blessings always come together. We know that we're saved by the sacrifice of Yeshua. And we know that in our salvation, a part of our salvation is to be baptized in water. We know that water is a sign of purification. So let us together see what God has for Israel. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, blessed Israel with water.
How important is this water availability for the stability of a country? You can see a connection between water stability and other kinds of stability. You don't think about it because it's reality for us. You know, we always have running water. There's always clean water.
The civilian war in Syria started because of the drought. There was a lot of potential for it, but it started because of the water.
Israel is mostly an arid place. The founding fathers realized that without water, there's no life. And there's no real possibility to develop a young country. From the beginning, they understood the importance of water and they acted upon it.
In this arid area, there is no agriculture if you do not have water. It's a real mission, valuable mission that you're doing for the people of Israel.
It's easy to forget when you drive through Israel today that all these places that you're looking at that have green and vegetation and agriculture, just a couple decades ago looked like this. They were barren, they were empty, they were completely dry, bone dry, as we say. When I was a child growing up in Israel, we were constantly trained to conserve water. Don't take long showers, don't let the hose run, don't water the yard. There was a huge need to conserve water because there was such a scarcity of water in this land. You came into Mekorot in the time where Israel was coming out of a drought and heading into the next drought.
That's right. 1 week after I got into the office, they established an investigation committee regarding the water problems in Israel.
Because we didn't have enough water.
The level of the water in the wells all over Israel was very low. It was really, really a serious situation then. It was when the desalination plant starting to be connected to the system, as we call it, the revolution of the water sector.
Ido was the CEO of Mekorot when Israel began to seriously address its water crisis. Mekorot is Israel's national water company. It was founded in 1937, which means it existed even before Israel officially became a country. Since then, it's grown into a huge company with many branches and over 3,000 water installations throughout the country, all with the purpose of supplying water to the people of Israel. I met with David Balsar, who manages Mekorot's Department of Innovations and Ventures, to discuss what is arguably Mekorot's biggest achievement yet, turning seawater into drinking water.
I guess this is one of the biggest achievements of the Mekorot and the state of Israel. We decided that drinking water would come from the sea. It's an endless resource of water. We built 5 desalination plants across the Mediterranean Sea and one more in Eilat, in the Red Sea. And this provides more than 80% of drinking water.
It's very substantial.
Yeah, so this enables us to detach ourselves from the dependence on climate. The second biggest achievement is agriculture. We are reusing 90% of our wastewater and turning them into high-quality water for irrigation.
Is that abnormal, or is this something that's common around the world?
That's a world record. Behind us is probably Spain with 30%.
I asked my people in Mekorot, do you have the system? How to take all this huge amount of water from the sea and put them into Israel? In 3 months, we plan and design the new national water system of Israel, and that was one of the most important thing.
They had the vision to think ahead, many years ahead, and establish this spine. It goes across the state of Israel, carries water to every point in Israel.
The relevance and importance of Israel's national water carrier is huge. David referred to it as a spine that goes across the whole country, and that's exactly what it is. It's essentially a huge water main, stretching across Israel from north to south, while the various stops along Israel's water infrastructure feed into it. This includes pumping stations, reservoirs, and now desalination plants.
Being part of a government effort to do good is a unique privilege.
Everywhere we look, Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, if you go farther, Iraq, I mean, no one in the region has water.
In Israel, we are now in a water surplus, so that's quite amazing.
The innovation and the creativity and the faith of those first settlers and even the governments of Israel transformed the way this country looked, so things that used to look like this are now full of agriculture. And today, just a couple generations later, me, my kids growing up here in the land, we're just living a different life. We no longer have to worry about water scarcity or water security in the land. The land has truly been transformed. That is nothing short of a modern-day miracle in the land. We're heading up north on the 6th, which is the main south-north route in the country, to the central Galilee. We're about to meet a woman named Bonnie, and by what I understand, which is not a lot, what she does is use fish, like legit, like little fish, to keep the water clean in Israel, and also to monitor the quality of water. I'm quite intrigued to see how this all works.
This is the major center where the water is collected, treated, tested. 24/7, this water is monitored and coddled.
This is the drinking water.
This water will become this is raw drinking water. This water has been pumped from the Sea of Galilee to be distributed for drinking water for Israel.
This is the magic fish pond?
This is the magic fish pond. Here.
These are the magic fish?
These are the hard-working fish.
They don't seem to be working very hard at all.
But they actually are. The water is pumped in through each of these chambers. The fish are all getting exposed to the water.
So the little, what do you call them, the fingerlings?
Yes, these are extremely sensitive to their environment. They will react very quickly if there's a change in some kind of an irritant.
What would you see? They start swimming quickly?
Very quickly, erratically, maybe up and down.
So they go into stress?
Exactly. They'll be extremely stressed. They could be aware of something like a chemical spill, an oil spill, anything outside their comfort zone.
These fish, if I'm not wrong, this is St. Peter's fish that you would eat in any restaurant on the shores of the Galilee.
Correct. These are tilapia. The mindset of Mikorot is to use as little artificial material as possible. So we're looking towards the natural world. What will give us the answer that we want? And
what would unnatural be? What,
chemicals.
Chemicals?
Chemicals. So let's see what nature does. How does nature know if the environment is not good? Kind of think of them as our little finny watchmen that are our first line of defense, that are guarding the drinking water for the citizens of Israel.
The water supply in this country has always been problematic. Just like today, the ancient Jewish kings we read about in the Bible were constantly innovating ways to supply water to the people and to keep the water supply protected during wartime. If you've ever visited the City of David archaeological dig in Jerusalem, then you've probably seen one of Jerusalem's biggest tourist attractions, Hezekiah's Tunnel. The name Hezekiah's Tunnel comes from the strongest hypothesis of the tunnel's origins. It seems that the tunnel was built by King Hezekiah from the Old Testament, and that he built it as a means of maintaining the water supply within Jerusalem during an impending siege by the Assyrians. Today, we're not battling the Assyrians, but we are winning the war against Israel's water crisis. We discussed how the majority of our water comes from desalination plants, which sit, as I'm sure you could guess, at sea level. But if you want to bring water up to Jerusalem, sitting at over 2,000 feet of elevation, you're going to need a pump, and it better be a big one.
Jerusalem doesn't have any water. Since 1,000 years ago till now, they had to push water to Jerusalem.
Bringing water to Jerusalem has been a historical problem since the early ages of history. You have Hezekiah's tunnel, you have waterworks going back 3, 4, 5,000 years back. Here you are thousands of years later doing the same thing at just this incredible scale. What is this place?
What we have here is 4 pumping units of 10,700 cubic per hour.
So this is what?
Yeah.
This is sort of the base station.
Yes.
That's doing what? That's taking all this water and like pushing it up the hill?
We have almost 250 meters of pushing the water up.
Just under 1,000 feet of elevation.
Yes.
When people talk about water, most people will imagine a pipe, maybe a little pump, maybe a filter, maybe a little reservoir.
Yeah, exactly.
These are much bigger projects. Like you built a city. This is, by the looks of it, one of the most impressive engineering projects in this country.
The main purpose of the tunnel is to convey water from this point to Jerusalem. Each piece is 30 meters. We have almost 1,000 pieces like this.
I think it's hard to grasp how big this project is until you stand in front of it and see how wide and how big these pieces are.
You must imagine water up to 40 bar pressure.
A very high pressure.
High pressure in about 3 meters per second.
Amazing. So we get to go into this tunnel now? We're riding on your special train?
Yes.
Let's do it. Wow, what a ride. So this is the end of the line?
Yes.
Everything from here is pipe all the way into Jerusalem?
Yes.
Amazing.
So this is a pipe, 2.6 meter diameter. This is the final product. The water will run here in this up to the east to Jerusalem. This is the reason that we invest a lot of money, that people in Jerusalem will open the tap.
And never have to think about it.
Yes.
What we are doing now, we are planning for the next 100 years to supply the water.
We've just been traveling through the country through the company you managed. There's technology everywhere, there's water everywhere, there's pipelines being laid into every tiny community in the country.
In this moment, Israel is quite an island which solved the water. I believe that Israel can also help a lot, all the Middle East, if it could be managed by the politicians.
Creative idea.
You know, my dream is that we could supply our water to Jordan, to Syria. Why not? In these pipes, the water will go to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem, by this pump, to Amman. Why not? Why not?
After a very impressive journey to key points across Israel's water sector, I had the privilege of sitting down with Yechezkel Lipschitz from Israel's newly established water ministry. He gave me an insider's perspective on the philosophy and attitude that sets Israel apart when it comes to water, especially in the Middle East.
Yechezkel, maybe just start by telling us what exactly you do in the Ministry for Water Resources.
So what we do in the ministry, first we're trying to prepare our water sector, our water economy for the future. We're building more desalination plants to be ready for the future droughts, for the future. In addition, we are strengthening the relationship between Israel and other countries by using what Israel has learned in the past decades. We are going to use the Israeli technology, share it with other countries, our closest and farthest neighbors, and bring water to everyone.
If I had to ask you to tell, from a bird's eye view, the story of water in this country, in this region, how would that look if you look 20 years back? You've been in the government for, 15 years now?
Exactly, something like that, yes.
You look 15 years back, you look at where we are today. How are things different now than they were back then?
At the beginning, we were looking only a few years ahead. Today, we are looking 20 and 30 years ahead. We have a master plan for the water sector for the year 2040 and 2050. That's because we understand that we have to plan for the next few decades. And the needs are growing all the time. Since the water is such a big issue in Israel, in all the Middle East, actually.
Well, we were just forced into it.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Looking at everything that's happened in the country in the last decades, it shows that there's been a huge amount of thought that's been given to changing the way we deal with water. And maybe you've been on the inside for a long time. Can you share the philosophy and the thought that's gone into shaping the way we work with water in this country?
One of the first laws that was accepted in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset, is the law of water. According to this law, the water belongs to everyone. That means that if you dig in your backyard and you find a well of water,
we all own it.
We all own it. Yeah. You and me and all the people in Israel. And this is the philosophy. We save water. We are not allowed to waste water. We want to leave the water for the future generations. And we have to keep the water because it belongs to everyone.
Most countries look at water as something that needs to be extracted, that needs to be taken out of nature. And you were saying that our government no longer looks at it that way. It looks at it as something that we need to replenish and build into.
A few decades ago, we used to take water from the Sea of Galilee, then we stopped. We're not taking water anymore. We're taking less and less water, and we'll have the ability to put back desalinate water back into the Sea of Galilee.
We're refilling a resource.
Exactly.
Interesting. We live in a very weird neighborhood. Having available water is not an obvious thing. And I think it's very unique. We now are building unique relationships with our neighbors where we're selling them water or providing them water. And maybe you can give us a little inside information on how that's working out.
Well, currently we have peace agreements with 3 neighbors, with Jordan Kingdom, Egypt, and the Palestinian Authority. According to the peace agreement with the Jordan Kingdom, we give the Jordanians every year about 50 million cubic meters from the Sea of Galilee straight to Amman. We also give the Palestinian Authority, by the way, more than we're obligated according to the peace agreement. And we signed a peace agreement with the United Arab Emirates. Yes, I'm sure they have water needs. They have very talented people over there. We can cooperate and collaborate with them in order to give water solutions, technologies of water for our new friends.
It's interesting you mention that, because I assume we're not going to be sending a pipe of water across the Gulf of Aqaba to the United Arab Emirates or any other Arab country. But the technology and the knowledge to manage the water infrastructure, that we can ship across whatever ocean.
Exactly. So the knowledge doesn't have any borders. I'm sure we can share our knowledge with the future friends that hopefully will sign the peace agreement with them in the coming few months. So all this neighborhood, the Middle East, is going to be changed.
Well, Chizke, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
It's been fascinating.
I had a pleasure.
We've learned how Israel's water system brings life to the farthest reaches of the country. And now it's time to see this miracle in action. I traveled into the desert to meet a man who's utilizing Israel's vast water infrastructure to prevent some very specific ancient plants significant to both the Jewish and the Christian faith from being lost forever.
This is what we call the core of the desert. Very, very salty, very hot here, no water at all. This is the tough desert.
So, Guy, this is your farm?
Yeah, this is my farm. This is the Balm of Gilad farm. We are located at the Jericho Valley.
10 minutes away from the Dead Sea.
We are 5 minutes from the Dead Sea, and this is why it's very salty.
The fact that we're sitting in the middle of a completely dry, scorching hot desert, and you have water to water these plants, that's a result of modern technology.
Technology, definitely. Yeah. On ancient time, this plant was grown only next to well springs. Over here, there is no well spring.
Yeah.
We are bringing the water from another place. I hit the road about 12 years ago with an even romantic vision to bring back the agriculture to the shores of the Dead Sea and to revive the industries that was once driven from it.
This is an ancient industry.
Yeah.
This isn't 25 years ago industry. This is...
No, this is
1,500 years.
Yeah. This industry was based on a very unique plant. Its name was the Balm of Gilad. This plant was grown agriculturally only here and only by the ancient Hebrew farmer. This plant was the source of one of the most important medication of ancient time, the source of the most desirable perfume in the Roman Empire. The plant was so important, so it served as the first ingredient of the incense of the Holy Temple, and since the Second Temple period is the only ingredient of the anointing oil of the kings and the priests. I want to bring it back.
Guy tapped into something here, reviving the cultivation of plants that our forefathers used in worship. First was the balm of Gilead, used in the temple and a staple of ancient Israel's economy. After that, another family of plants that we read about in the Gospels caught his attention: frankincense and myrrh.
This is the same frankincense and myrrh that we read in the story of the Magi coming to see baby Jesus. It's the same plant.
The same plant, definitely, is in danger of extinction. If we want the next generation to be familiar with the frankincense, we have to make agriculture out of it, otherwise it will disappear from the world. This is my vision.
So guys, these are your trees.
Yeah.
These are guys' babies.
These are my babies. This is a myrrh called glandulosa. This is Indian myrrh called Commiphora whitey. This is a myrrh called Harvey. This is the Yemeni myrrh. It's considered to be very high quality myrrh. It got a very unique smell. I made a few hundred plants of it because I really like its smell. Smell it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah. Let's make the balm of Gilead. It got different note of smell in different parts of the plant. I'm going to cut it and bring your finger here. Smell it.
That's an amazing smell.
These plants were sacred to our ancestors, and without this little farm by the Dead Sea, we could lose this important part of our history. Guy is using the same water system that keeps the people of Israel alive and hydrated to bring life to the desert and make sure these ancient elements of worship are accessible for at least another generation.
Without the modern delivery system of the water, it wouldn't be possible to make this agriculture. And thanks to this, I'm able to grow my plants.
It's amazing. We've had this chance to sort of see how this system works around the country, that at the end of the line, somewhere in the middle of the desert, is Guy Ehrlich and his biblical plants. He opens the tap and water flows out to his plants.
This is part of the Zionist story of bringing back the past into life.
Shalom and welcome to Insights, Israel and the Middle East. We're here to connect the dots between the land, the Bible, and current events.
Theoretically, nothing's supposed to grow, but look, everything is green, everything is flourishing.
So far, it's worked.
So far.
Just asking for a friend, how safe is this?
It's okay.
We don't know. Pretty safe.
What are you growing here? I mean, what are all the plants that are growing here?
It's easier to ask what we're not growing.
What do you not grow here?
Exactly.
If you don't know what's in the ground, you're in a sense acting blindly.
We're sending sensors to Africa, to Asia, to places that you will never imagine.
Basically, we're teaching the world how to feed itself.
What you have here is examples of cancer cells that are being killed by natural plant substances.
Yes, exactly. The desert has a lot to offer.
The Zionist dream still exists and lives in our hearts.
We all remember the story of the 12 spies. When Moses sent them in the land, we all know the beautiful picture of those two spies carrying the grapevine. But when the people of Israel came back from diaspora after the second exile, when God is bringing them back in the beginning of the 19th century, the biggest problem was how would they provide for themselves? There was a need, there was a necessity. And this necessity brought Israel in the field of agriculture to levels which none of our neighbors got to. Israel is leading in the agriculture worldwide. Agriculture turned into a science here in the land of Israel, and it turned into a science because of necessity. I believe that God, the same God that brought us into the land, gave us a supernatural wisdom in the field of agriculture. Let us see what God did in this field in the land of Israel.
It was real people with real ambition who transformed this land from the desert into an agricultural dreamland, like the one we're standing in right now. And when you think about the miracle of the transformation, the depth of that transformation, you realize what a unique characteristic those people truly had.
We're looking at a flourishing, green, amazing desert, which it's kind of an oxymoron.
Instead of struggling, you're sitting in a place that is a mass exporter of goods to the entire world. It's layer on layer on layer on layer of innovation, research, discovery, necessity pushing into just really creative ideas.
Out of every challenge grows an opportunity here in the desert.
You're walking through the desert, and you keep looking at all these plants, and you're saying to yourself, there must be something more.
I've met two kinds of Israelis. The ones that a challenge for them is a closed door and that's it. And the kind of Israelis that said that the closed door is only an excuse to get into this room through the window.
I took a journey deep into southern Israel, to the Arava. The Arava is a long desert valley along the border with Jordan that stretches from the Dead Sea to the Gulf of Eilat. And it's incredibly hot and dry here. Surprisingly, it's also a mainstay of Israel's agriculture industry. What a place, Nadav.
No place like home.
Look at this beautiful view.
This is what we see every morning from our window.
And it's very much not what you would expect from the middle of the desert, quote unquote. More agriculture than many areas of the country have.
Probably greener than a lot of the places you've been at. And this is, the land of the endless summer.
Right now we're in Chatzeva, a cooperative agricultural village in southern Israel, or a moshav, as it's known in Hebrew. It was founded in 1965 as part of Israel's desert agriculture revolution. With 150 independent farms operating today, Chatzeva remains a key player in making sure desert farming continues to thrive. Nadav, who oversees the entire moshav, gave me the grand tour. So let's go back to your origin story. You're not of this place.
I'm not originally
of this place. Yes. How did you end up in the middle of the desert?
The Zionist dream still, exists and lives in our hearts.
What is that in your mind?
So look, we're half a mile from the Jordanian border, and to the west, also nothing there. We've decided we want to grow our kids here and basically make the desert bloom, bring a different kind of Israel here on a human level. And right now, I'm the CEO of the moshav. So I wasn't even born here, not raised here, but now I, as they say, I run this joint. When you get into your car and you drive south of Beersheba into the desert, you see a lot of yellow. This is desert. Why would I want to live here? And then you take a left turn into the moshav and you see a lot of green. And every time we have people that haven't spent much time here, they say, it's amazing. I didn't realize it's so much green here. The Israeli market is very small. How many people in Israel eat? 8 million people? It's nothing. We grow for about 80 million people because people are, persistent, they're trying, and it's working. The topsoil here is something that almost nothing grows on. And we can see date farms and grapefruits, peppers and tomatoes and all kind of, the good stuff.
Things that don't belong in this place, basically.
It's a ton of things that don't belong in this place. Okay. And also the knowledge that people have gained through the years, we don't keep it to ourselves. Basically, we're teaching the world how to feed itself. Now you've entered Moshav Chatzeva. See the date trees and the little turnabout that says, in the Negev, the people of Israel will be tested by David Ben Gurion. This is how we live our life.
So far, it seems like you've done well with this test.
So far, so good. So far, so good. These are called net houses. They're not greenhouses. This is a greenhouse. You would grow tomatoes in it, cucumbers. And to our left, it's tunnels, eggplants, watermelons. You can see we also grow corn here. Israeli agriculture is very high-tech. We moved from throwing some water on the ground and see whatever grows to drip irrigation, hanging the plants, making more out of the three major things that you need for growing something. You need soil, you need water, and you need sun. So sunlight we have year-round. Water, we don't have good quality water here, but we drill for about a mile deep, and we take very salty water, but we learn how to use them in the fields. Even the soil that we step on, most of the crops are not grown on this soil. So we bring soil from other parts of Israel. We put it on the topsoil that already exists, and then we grow on it. About 100 years ago, When Jews from mostly European countries, cold countries, when they moved to Israel, they wanted to tear off this image of the Jew that was always looked down and always were looked down at.
And overnight, they shed the shell of the diaspora of 2,000 years of being detached from the land and the country.
You saw a new Jewish face. You saw the strong farmer. You don't see the black clothes. You don't see the long beard. You see the strong Jew that is moving to Israel and making the desert bloom.
It's sort of like the ultimate test of character. You can't be soft and make it in the desert. Even if you look into the biblical narrative, you can't ever achieve something of virtue or quality without going through a desert phase, without the hardship and the struggle.
Let's show you some of our greenhouses. We talk so much. Here you go. Welcome. We have the cherry tomatoes, which are very famous for Israel. And if you look at the way that we grow them, this is a stem, right? This is a tomato stem. So it should just grow from the ground straight up, right? But what we do here, we take it around, back and forth, back and forth. Why? When you have a single stem that goes up, you can have 20 tomatoes, 40 tomatoes. Here you can take out of one stem, one plant, about 400 tomatoes. Why do we even need to grow things on the ground? We have strawberries. There's a little bit of dirt in it, and they use whatever water they need. And because they're in an angle, whatever leftover water flows down to a water tank, and you reuse the water. Here you have mint. Now, why grow mint on the ground? Why not grow it on a post? Let it go up. Easier to pick, less insects, less bugs. If I have a greenhouse, okay, so I'll probably plant several plants and let it grow. No, there's a better way to do it. Try to hang it, try to push it, try to pull it.
We're standing in this place that's a hub of thinking creatively about how to maximize everything.
Exactly. So, tell me how it is. Just dig into it.
Oh, this is juicy.
Great, huh?
Very sweet.
I can live off of that. So right now, we're going to a date farm that a friend of mine is working on. It's right over there. So now we're gonna meet Tomer.
Hey, Tomer.
Hi, nice to meet you.
How's it going?
Okay.
Coming up?
Yeah, we're coming up.
So Tomer, you're the real deal. When we think about the people out in the desert making agriculture happen, you're the face of that.
I appreciate it. I want to teach my kids also to know what is hard work and why we're here in Israel. I need to do it myself before I teach other people to do it. So I take the challenge on myself right now.
So I imagine, Tomer, most of the work happens at height, and we're here mainly because we want to go up.
So let's go up.
Let's go up.
Let's go up. So here you can actually see the view. On this side is the moshav itself, Hatzeva, more day plantation, greenhouses.
When you get up at height, it's even more shocking how much there's a contrast. You're in the middle of the most deserty desert you could imagine.
This is exactly the future of agriculture in Israel. If Tomer and her likes will choose to come here to learn about it, to work in this environment for a year or two, I can see a bright future because this is going to be a very high-tech field of expertise. We think here in the Arava, this is the next field where Israel is going to lead the world, and Tomer is a perfect example for it.
The early pioneers who came back to the land in the late 19th century endured incredible hardship trying to cultivate the land again. And over time, with the development of technology, things got easier. Today, things are much different. Israel became an exporter of technology and knowledge to the farthest corners of the earth. In fact, in deserts around the world today, plants and fields are growing with technology coming out of the land of Zion. So we've seen how Israeli innovation has helped with the desert problem, but now we're going to meet something slightly different. We're on our way up to Netanya, which is in the northern coastal area of Israel, to meet with CropX, which is this new startup company who've developed a new sensor package which is supposed to help farmers around the world have a deeper understanding of exactly what's happening in their field in real time. Tomer, we're about to see a demonstration of the system. Do you want to introduce your all-star team before we get started?
Yeah, sure thing. Avi recently did Aliyah from New Jersey. He's an agronomist in data science on the agronomy team. And Guy is the VP of agronomy. He knows everything there is to know. So he's
the guy with the plan, huh?
Exactly, the brain. Mai grew up in Los Angeles. She's part of the customer service team.
So this is it. I mean, I was expecting, some heavy machinery. It looks like you guys brought the same equipment I have at home.
Just one power tool, and that's all you need.
All I do is I find where I want to put it in the field, and then I dig a hole, just make sure. And then we just screw it into the ground as such. And it's that simple.
I can now see the data from the soil. I can see that it was recently fertilized. I can see the moisture content of the soil, and I can see soil temperature. So with this data that I get immediately, the farmer can make much better decisions.
CropX represents Israeli agritech at its finest. It's a smart farming device that gives farmers real-time insights into the conditions of their soil, and it's being used around the world.
CropX is part of the agtech revolution. So we have sensors in this device that measure the moisture of the soil, electroconductivity, which is salinity, the saltiness of the soil. We connect that to nitrogen and fertility, and temperature. The part that you see out of the ground transmits to the cloud.
What have farmers been doing so far?
In many places, they do this.
You're kidding?
No, I'm not kidding.
Still today in the first world?
Yeah. We create much more value, between 10 and 20% yield increasement, which is huge. With every sensor that is installed across the globe, our system continues to learn and to get smarter. And the power of the system grows because the system
the system is getting more clever.
The system, yeah, exactly. When I was done with my previous startup, I really looked for something different that kind of had a do-good part to it. Since then, I haven't looked back.
Yet again, the challenges Israelis are facing have led to solutions that impact people everywhere in the world. This is what happens when God blesses a nation, promises to prosper them, and then empowers them to carry out his promises.
If you can make it in the Arava, you can probably make it anywhere in Israel. If you want to be a pioneer in any field of expertise, this is the place to be.
It's a huge honor being able to expose Israel to the world through positive technology, that really helps save the globe.
From the Arava, where people are putting in the hours and developing methods to make the desert bloom, to innovative Israeli tech that is creating a global smart farming network. The future looks bright, and the sky's the limit.
With us today is Professor Chaim Rabinovich. The Bible tells us that the land of Israel is the land of milk and honey. And with him, we're going to discuss the whole issue of agriculture. Professor Rabinovich, welcome to our show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
In Israel, you're known to be the father of the cherry tomatoes.
I'm not the father. I'm a member of a team, maybe headed the team and so on and so forth. But it all started with our previous work on extending the shelf life of the tomato. Indeed, the shelf life of the tomato was extended, but B, the tomato could stay on the bush for a longer period of time, thus accumulate more sugars, more acids, more volatiles. So all the goodies, instead of being compacted into, let's say, 50 tons, is being compacted in 25, so it's even more tasty. Picking cherry tomatoes is laborious. A trained worker with salad tomato, or does like that, picks about 800 kilograms per day. A cherry tomato is 60 kilograms per day, so it's much more expensive. And we asked ourselves, when you buy grapes, do you ever dream of buying grapes individually? Never.
Never.
You think about a bunch of grapes, right? So why can't we do the same thing with cherry tomatoes?
Oh, beautiful.
So, when a fruit develops seeds, actually a lot of energy, which means lots of sugars, lots of fatty acids, proteins, and so on and so forth, go into the seed, which is the embryo of the next generation. Now, Israel was the first one to develop what we call parthenocarpic cucumbers, ones that develop without seeds. That means, A, you don't need fertilizers, so you save a lot of the space. All the plants are female for this respect. B, cucumbers are much more tasty. And this was spread all over the world. In every field of agriculture that you throw a stone, you find a touch of Israeli innovative approach.
When we talk about Israel, Israel is known that is leading in agriculture. It's probably because of necessity, but in which...
Mainly because of necessity.
Yeah.
It's a combination of very high-skilled farmers very good supporting system of experts, very good contacts. Most of Israeli farmers are university graduates, and they keep, well, there are very few of them today. There are about 12,000 growers in Israel. And it's not surprising to get a telephone call from a farmer. Look, I was a student like 20 years ago. I have a problem. Can you help me in answering the problem, and so on and so forth. Very high sophisticated seed industry of fruit and vegetables that were developed in Israel and are being sold now all over the world, rather than importing things that were developed, let's say in Denmark, and I have nothing against Denmark, but it is suitable to a different climate, different soil, different everything. So by adding this together with good farming, you can get a good produce.
Professor Chaim Rabinovich, what a great insight on agriculture. Thank you very much. And for you, our friend, stay with us for another insight on Israel.
We use technology and innovation to grow crops in the desert despite the harsh conditions. But when you take those conditions and combine them with agricultural know-how and medical science, miracles can take place.
Hello, Rivki.
Shalom, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Is this your famous lab?
Yes, please enter.
Thank you.
At a young age, Dr. Rivki Ophir packed her bags and headed to Israel's Arava desert, where she got her PhD in plant biology. For decades, she has been studying the healing properties of plants native to the Arava. And what she's discovered is that their ability to heal is directly related to the desert environment in which they grow.
So we're here because you present a fascinating story. So maybe we can start sort of with the background story of how you got to here today.
Love brought me here. This was in 1973. I joined my husband, Moshele. He was the founder of the Moshav Chatzeva. From 1973 to 1982, we worked on the fields and raised 3 kids. And I always dream about going back to science. Lucky me, on 1982, I went to do my PhD in Ben-Gurion University. I asked the question why the immune system failed to eradicate cancer diseases.
It's quite relevant still.
Quite relevant still. Being a mother, travel a lot in the desert. Around me, I saw the desert plants, and I already had the idea that there is some secret in this plant, and maybe I will be able to harness them to my research. In one of the plants, which is called Achillea fragmentosa, I found something very interesting, not just against cancer, but against brain diseases. There was one compound that I really liked, so the chemists said, bring me a lot of this material, and I will separate this compound and give you a tube with this compound. So I went to the desert, to the same place where I collect this plant, took the seeds, went to the farm, irrigate, fertilize, etc., and I have a huge amount bags with the plant, and I went to this chemist in Tel Aviv, and he said, I need to disappoint you. I can find this compound only in the desert plant. I don't find it where you irrigate.
While trying to extract this miracle compound, Dr. Rivki stumbled across the true secret of the desert.
Many people, when they imagine a plant, we want to give it the best conditions. But in reality, especially in the desert, they need some kind of stress.
The plants that grow in the desert, going through many harsh conditions, like irradiation, salt, sun, no rain.
The quality only comes out when it's hard.
Yes.
So this is the famous lab?
Yes, and in the lab we have cells. Cancer cells will grow here in the incubator.
Can I take a look?
You can look at them. In order to be expert, you need to look in the microscope.
I'm not an expert.
Yes.
So the yellow ones in your sample are the cancer cells that died from desert plant extracts.
Exactly. Yes.
That's
and we
quite a
have
good
many
sample there.
Yes, we have many examples like this.
You say this in passing as if it's like an obvious thing, but what you have here is examples of cancer cells that are being killed by natural plant substances.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's quite a statement.
Exactly.
For you, it's like, yes, another day in the office, but for most people, that's news.
Exactly.
It's not chemo, it's not radiation.
Yes.
That is killing cancerous cells.
Exactly. So many years, I tell the people that there is something unique in the desert, and suddenly I was able to prove it.
It's just a beautiful process. Say, like, look, there must be something about these plants. There's something about the hardship, and then you proved it. It's almost impossible to miss the analogies between the personal journey and the story of reclaiming the desert. You sort of did that same process on the cellular level.
I agree with you. I really agree. Thank you for making all these conclusions.
It's your story.
Thank you for joining us as we provide a spiritual insight of what God is doing in Israel and in the Middle East. If you want to learn more about what God is doing in Israel, make sure to visit us on our webpage and follow us on social media. Shalom, and God bless you from Jerusalem.